Hello, it's Dr. Cindy with this week's mental health moment. In the two previous mental health moments, I talked about a number of different coping strategies and relational styles that develop in childhood and carry over into adulthood. While these arose as our best effort at managing our early experiences and trying to ensure security and love, they can be overly confining and limiting for us as adults. Last week, I focused on how to start developing other ways of reacting to and interacting with others in order to expand past those habitual reflexive patterns. Today, I'm going to talk about the resistance we might experience as we start trying to do things differently. Resistance can be an internal experience we have when we try to make changes in our typical ways of interacting with others. It can also be a reaction that we receive from others when we start doing things differently, because this deviates from the established habits and patterns in those relationships. It is important to be prepared for both types of resistance so we do not allow them to push us back into our usual ways of reacting and responding. Let's start with internal resistance. If you tried any of the exercises I suggested last week, you may have found it difficult initially to break out of the way that you've always done things. We are all creatures of habit. If you don't believe this, try mixing up your shampooing and washing routine the next time you take a shower. It will feel odd and foreign, and you will have to consciously focus on doing things differently rather than mindlessly doing what you always do. Habits enable us to do many routine tasks on autopilot so our brain can actively attend to more important things. This is very beneficial and efficient. Otherwise, we would have to think through every single one of our actions and activities step by step to make sure we complete them correctly. Our brain likes autopilot because that means everything is going smoothly and there are no challenges to have to take care of. So when we begin to change our habits, it necessarily requires more mental energy and focus. And our brain will naturally register this as us going against the program. So it will try to get us to go back to how we usually do things. Additionally, any change puts us on alert to one degree or another because novelty makes our brain and nervous system more attentive until we know we are safe. One of my favorite personal examples of this is when I moved my practice from one building to another many years ago. My new office was not even 2 miles away from the old one. I brought all of the same furnishings and artwork and was going to see the very same people I had been seeing all along. Yet I found myself feeling nervous the first day I went to work there. Nervousness is the way our brain cues us to be on alert while it scans new settings and situations to make sure everything is okay. Trying to shift out of our coping strategies can be particularly uncomfortable because those have been our internalized guidelines to follow in our efforts to feel safe and loved. Think of these as unconscious rules that you created for yourself as a child based on your attempts to understand and manage the experiences you're having. As with other rules, children are afraid of breaking them because it feels like a threat to safety and security. So when you go to do something differently, it's going to feel scary and risky. Hopefully you've taken some time to reflect on what some of those rules are that you created for yourself early on. It might be a rule that says, people love me when I'm helpful to them. I need to keep my feelings to myself so people don't get mad at me. Or I have to resolve other people's problems so things turn out okay. Whatever these rules are, they likely dictate how you approach people and situations in your life rather than enabling you in each moment to figure out and follow through with what is actually right for you. The good news is you are the only one who is holding you to those rules. Have you ever had someone else tell you, you have to do everything perfectly, or I won't love you, or I won't love you unless you always give me my way? If they did, you would hopefully think those statements and expectations were outrageous and unfair and would react negatively against them. In fact, you might even decide you didn't want to have that person in your life. So consider that if you wouldn't want anyone else imposing those kinds of unreasonable rules on you, then maybe it's time to stop imposing them on yourself. The internal pressure to follow these rules can be intense, so going against them will cause us to feel anxious and uncomfortable. It is easy to misinterpret that resistance as meaning we shouldn't follow through with the change we're trying to make because sticking with the old way of doing things makes us feel safe. Recognizing that that resistance comes from the child part of you feeling like you are breaking a rule and putting yourself in danger can help you work through the fear and discomfort that you will experience. Depending on the situation and the level of new behavior you are trying out, that child may feel terrified. Be prepared for this so you don't let that terror keep you stuck. One way to address this is to mentally rehearse ahead of time what that new behavior is. That way you can soothe yourself through whatever anxiety arises as you imagine the scenario, which can help reverse that instinctive response. Let's say you have tended to be a people pleaser, keeping your thoughts and feelings to yourself and going along with what others are wanting. Think of some people and situations where you can start to practice asserting yourself more. You might decide, for example, to invite a friend to go to lunch, but instead of asking him or her where they would like to go like you always do, instead say, "Oh, I'd like to go to such and such restaurant. Does that sound good to you?" Now, even just imagining a small interaction like this might make you feel nervous. Connect with the discomfort, knowing that it's coming from a younger version of you who really believes that stating what you want will make people mad at you. You might tell that child, "It's okay, you're safe. We get to pick the restaurant. Isn't that great?" And look for an opportunity to actually try this out by inviting a friend out to eat. Whenever you feel any type of anxiety about asserting yourself, connect to that worried child and reassure them that it's okay. Remember that our brain perceives all thought as real. So as far as it's concerned, every scenario you play out in your mind is an actual situation you're experiencing. The more you imagine your part in these interactions, the way you would like it to go, while working through any challenging feelings that come up, the more you are strengthening your ability to express your wants and wishes, and the easier it will be to do this in actual interactions with others. You can create and work through increasingly more challenging opportunities in the very same way. You might want to write out various scenarios in which you tend to lapse into people pleasing and then order them from easiest to most difficult so you know what order you want to work on these in. There are probably certain people in your life that it feels more comfortable to imagine expressing yourself more openly with compared to others. So start with them. And there may be particular types of issues or topics that are easier to assert yourself around than others. So begin with those. Hopefully, by the time you get to the more difficult ones on your list, they won't even feel so difficult anymore, as you have increased your comfort and confidence advocating for yourself. Now, there are some subtle ways that people pleasing can come through in interpersonal relationships. If you find yourself frequently answering, "Oh, I don't care, it's up to you, anything's fine, whatever you want, doesn't matter to me," in response to another person's inquiry, that is probably coming from years of accommodating. When we develop the mindset that our opinions don't matter or that other people's wants and wishes are more important than ours, not only do we habitually defer to other people, but we can even lose sight of what's meaningful and significant to us. So while it might not seem like such a big deal in and of itself to let the other person pick the TV show to watch, the restaurant to go to, or what to have for dinner, those are all opportunities to start rediscovering what your preferences are and to practice expressing those. Even if you feel you truly don't care, include yourself in the decision-making process as much as possible. Because years of people pleasing and accommodating disconnect us from our own thoughts, feelings, and opinions about things, it can be challenging to know what's really right and true for us deep down. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between the temporary relief that comes from avoiding or diverting a conflict versus the true peace that comes from really feeling good about and accepting of whatever the outcome of a conversation is. One thing that can help with this is to pay attention to how you feel after the conversation is over. If you notice that you feel unsettled, let down, discouraged, or disappointed, that's a clue that you probably abandoned your own wants and wishes for the sake of the other person's. That's important to pay attention to and take note of because it will help you become more aware of your preferences and needs, in addition to helping you recognize when you have lapsed into people pleasing. So when you go to put your newly developing assertiveness skills into action, make sure you take time to get clarity on exactly what it is you are wanting in the specific situation and how you will communicate that. If you go in not entirely sure about where you stand, you will be much more likely to quickly and automatically give in and accommodate to what the other person wants. If you're caught off guard by a request and haven't been able to consider how you feel, try to buy yourself some time. It's okay to say, let me think about that, and then take the time to do so. As you have likely discerned from these examples, the responses we receive from other people can have an influence on our success with the changes we are trying to make. So, in addition to the internal resistance that we must work through in order to break out of old patterns and shift into healthier ways of interacting, we also have to be prepared for how we will handle reactions from others when we start making these changes. The relationships you have with significant people in your life are predicated on your habitual ways of relating with each other. So they might be caught off guard when you start doing things differently. Depending on the dynamics of the relationship, you may experience significant pushback when you assert yourself if they're used to you always agreeing with them. Be ready for this because that people-pleasing child in you is going to be paying very close attention and looking for the first sign of trouble. Remember, in their world, people get upset if you don't go along with them, and that anger or disappointment means loss of safety and loss of love. So if the other person seems resistant in any way to your assertive behavior, that confirms that child's worst fear, and the temptation will be to revert back to accommodating and giving in. Also keep in mind that that child is going to be extra sensitive to any perceived negative reaction, no matter how slight. So no matter how the other person is actually feeling, your emotional experience will likely be that they are upset with you. As hard as it may feel in that moment, try to reassure yourself that you are safe and that it's okay to speak your truth. Then stick with what you are wanting and assert that again to the other person. If they try to debate or convince, you don't have to give good reasons or rationale. You can simply state, that's just how I feel. If they persist and you feel yourself about to give in and go against what is right for you, it's okay to step away and say, I need to think about this some more. And take the time to regroup and work through the anxiety and discomfort you are feeling. Again, mentally practicing and rehearsing this part of the interaction in advance can help you work through some of the anxiety and discomfort of standing up for yourself in the face of another person's resistance, and can help you feel more confident in your ability to be assertive in an actual conversation. Role-playing various scenarios with a trusted friend or family member can also help you get more comfortable with speaking up for yourself. Have them respond initially with minor levels of resistance, gradually increasing the intensity of it as you get better at working through the discomfort and sticking with what you are trying to communicate. Because our habitual ways of interacting are so ingrained, even when we actively practice new ways of doing things, there will be times when we revert back to our old tendencies. The more stress we are under, the more likely that is to occur. When that happens, we can still take action to resolve the challenging situation in ways that are more in line with how we would like it to be. So, for example, if you have an intense conversation with your significant other and you end up lapsing into agreement with him or her just to keep the peace and to end the conflict, it doesn't mean you have failed. Use it as an opportunity to see where you need more practice and identify what happened that made it difficult for you to stay true to yourself in that interaction. Then give yourself permission to try again. First, take some time to comfort yourself through whatever the challenging feelings are that you're having about the conversation. Once you feel more settled, reconnect with what it was that you were trying to communicate and try again. You might say, oh, I'm not feeling good about how the conversation ended. I would like to talk more about it. Then do your best to again assert your thoughts and feelings about the situation. Now, the goal isn't to somehow get your partner to agree with you instead, but to be able to close the conversation with you being clear to them about how you feel. You can communicate to your partner that it is important that to you that he or she acknowledge where you are coming from and truly hear what you have to say, no matter what the ultimate decision ends up being. In most interpersonal disagreements, there are multiple options for some type of compromise that takes both people's thoughts and feelings into account. When we stick to trying to please others and keep the peace in conversations, we compromise ourselves and perpetuate our belief that our opinions don't matter. In the process, we're hiding who we are. In every relationship, there needs to be enough room for both people in it, and expressing your wants and wishes helps you come out of hiding. Be gentle and patient with yourself as you do this challenging work. Respect that your resistance is trying to protect you, and recognize that you no longer need that protection now. With persistence through the resistance, you can get to the other side and no longer be limited or held back by old patterns of coping. As you do the work to reconnect with what is important to you and work to more consistently communicate that to others, you free the child from the fear they've been living in your whole life, and you can more often be your full adult self in all that you do. Take care and have a good week.